mostly your element down here next to your carving station.
Yeah.
Amongst the lovely wood watchers and examples of your carvings behind you. But we're also here to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about your origin story. And just like I did mine, I know a lot of people that have read your book or watched Flash interviews or, the documentaries. They probably know quite a bit, but this is an opportunity for you to tell maybe a little more
Mm-hmm.
about you, that kind of what led you to being so interested in strange things and made you follow down that path.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll let you get into it.
Launch.
Launch in.
Okay, Allie. Well, so this is where I usually hang out. Is if I'm not up editing with Allie or doing numerous other things around the property and off the property, or filming or looking into witnesses or commenting. I'm out here chainsaw carving, and it's just something that I fell in love with during COVID, and picked up an electric steel chainsaw and kind of never looked back since. So these are my little fellas and ladies behind me right now, believe it or not. And they're getting ready to be put on exhibit because Al and I will be hosting and presenting a conference down in Oak Ridge coming up here on the 10th and 11th of July, so really shortly. So I got a lot of work to do on a commission. What's there to say, Allie, except the fact that if you do something long enough, you have evolving opinions about the subject matter. And when it comes to Bigfoot, I've been wrong more times than I've been right. But one thing's kind of remained the same, and I think it is the same way with you, is that we don't want to prove this mystery. We want to enjoy it as it presents itself. And so, like, this is the gray area, the gray box. And enjoying that not knowing and the mystery of it all, I think is, that's probably why there's this longevity to why I've searched for the phenomena and found out that you can't really search for anything. You have to just kind of like wait for it to present itself to you. And, I didn't think that at first. I thought maybe if you followed up on this phenomena long enough with recent witness reports and go to place names, which are, areas that Henry Franzoni talked about in his book, The Spirit of Seattle, where if you go to a place name that has kind of a foreboding title to it, like Devil Mountain, Spirit Mountain, Devil Lake, Spirit Lake. There's even one like called Baboon Creek up by where we're headed in Oak Ridge next week. So tell me how Baboon Creek got its name, also a Bigfoot hotspot. I thought that's how you would have an eventual sighting. And it turns out that, yeah, you can see stuff and enjoy like finding footprints and stuff like that. But our bread and butter came in kind of like a journalistic approach to talking, meeting, and kind of embedding ourselves as much and as close as you can, Jane Goodall style, to these long-term witnesses or these extended experiencers of Sasquatch interaction. And that came out of the work of Sally Shepard Walford, who is the author of Valley of the Skookum. That was really the first Bigfoot book I read. And Sally Shepard Walford lived in a little town of Ording, Washington, and her daughter, Autumn, also Autumn Williams, the author of Enoch, which is also another Bigfoot story. It was really Sally, her husband, and Autumn that kind of took me under their wing because of proximity where I lived at the time, and basically said, yeah, you can go to these other areas and you can have fleeting encounters. But if you listen to my mom, Sally in this case, you can get to know these habituators, which I don't really use the term habituators that much because I don't know, it implies that there's not as much going on with them except the fact that they have habituated themselves to some kind of like frequent encounter with the other, in this case, Bigfoot. But having done the work and getting to know these habituators, you find out really quick that they are experiencers just like ET experiencers and abductees, or like people that live in haunted houses, poltergeist experiencers. And why would that be? Because if Bigfoot is something that's expected to be flesh and blood only, then you shouldn't have all this other nonsense happening around them. But then, you get involved with going to these people's houses and you sit with them long enough and they trust you to say what else is happening, they start talking about these darn lights. And there's a lot of reason why I started looking into this stuff, but people can go back and look at the book or the interviews. But I want to talk about the three things that left a mark on me here, to the degree where, and Allie and I just watched Close Encounters, director's cut, of the third kind. And again, it is reinforced that that is the most important UFO movie. I call it a documentary that is not a Bigfoot movie, but is a Bigfoot movie, because it's the same experience that a lot of us have had along the way with being obsessed and not really knowing why. And so looking into this subject matter, I felt that obsessive nature start to kick in. The first real experience that happened along the way, and we're fast forwarding through doing town halls and 2009 timeframe up at a place called Ike's Pizza. We're fast forwarding through doing a couple conferences at the Lane Community College, which I, funded with my own GI Bill money. A lot of people don't know that, but that's how obsessed I was with it. Like, I was paying a lot out of pocket in order to meet people that knew more about this phenomena than myself. Like I said, we're fast forwarding through those years of like 2008, 2009 timeframe. And then came Earl Kelso. And Earl Kelso was the ultimate extended experiencer habituator. He lived right off of the highway inside the town of Vida, Oregon, right off the highway. He was a SEAL before the SEALs were ever invented. He was like the first SEAL. And he had an incredible portfolio of his wartime in World War II that he showed me. But him and his daughter Candy and his grandson Eric lived 4 doors down from a gal named Mary and Chad. And now these neighbors lived behind a mountain. The mountain was actually right behind them. And they showed up at these town hall meetings that I did. And they didn't know each other until they showed up at these Bigfoot town hall meetings. And what we found out is that literally like 2 miles up the road, there was significant Bigfoot interaction happening with these 2 unknown families, the Kelsos and Chad and Mary. Chad and Mary raised pit bulls. They had a couple roommates as well. They lived like in a 4-story, maybe a huge house. It was totally out of the norm for the area. And then Earl, Candy, and Eric lived in a double wide. But the one thing they had in common was that mountain behind them. And what they were saying is that they had eye glow, not eye shine. They had more than one individual, possibly a family unit, and that they were leaving tracks periodically in the snow, in this case, and that the tracks disappeared in the field. Also, Earl's daughter Candy said that she would see people or something standing in the woods in her bedroom window as she was changing her clothes. So she thought it was just a pervert. Now, I got permission from Mary, first of all, and Chad. And Mary was She was pretty well to do. Like, I could tell that she was kind of running the house, and that Chad, who I believe has passed on, was kind of like guarding the house, guarding the property. And it struck me that Chad was paranoid. Now, maybe it's because he didn't want people messing with his pit bulls. I think it was like a real rare breed. They were more than 12 of them, all in kennels, and they lined the mountain. And so after the town hall meeting, I was breaking down the camera equipment. I think Finding Bigfoot had just left filming. And so they did not want to be on camera, but they wanted to talk to locals. And they talked to me, and they said, we have them in our backyard. And I said, well, okay, what are we doing? And he's just like, well, come by tonight. Well, I had all this camera equipment. There's nearly a fatality between me and a friend on Highway 126 when a horse carriage slammed into the side of my car. It was a nutty night, but we still went because I saw that look in their eye, and it was familiar of other witnesses that they had something that was happening on the property. And so me and a gal named Beth, who is a fellow researcher, she had some connections to the Olympic project, went out there and interviewed Chad and Mary. And Beth took over Mary, and I took over Chad. And the one thing that they said is that these things like to mess with our kids. And I've seen them before. Hi there, tweeter. We got a little Tweety bird. Let me go back. Mary said something really interesting to Beth in private. And then I was talking to Chad, and Chad just like, they race back and forth, I believe with glowing eyes, I don't remember what color, at night. And I've shot at them because they're messing with my dogs, and my dogs aren't scared of anything. And they're hiding at the back of their kennel. And we have these weird muddy footsteps going to the back of the mountain, and these glyphs that are shoved into the steps. And he goes, let me grab one. And so 4 times the size of this were sticks that he said were jammed into the muddy steps going up the mountain that were bound together with pitch and mud, as though something made a homemade epoxy. And it was strange looking. Now, obviously anybody could have made that, but because the dogs were alerting, because of the look in Chad's eye, and because of what I'm about to tell you, Mary had told Beth in private, and then after Beth had got done talking to Mary, she came up and told me, just like, hey, Mary just told me that she's seen them before, and she doesn't want her kids to see what she saw. And I said, what had happened? And so I went and talked to Mary. She goes, oh, I'm familiar with this phenomena. I've seen them before on the beach. I think it was out near Newport or Florence. She goes, when I was a kid and I lived out there, we looked up on the sand bluffs and we saw one masturbating. And she goes, I do not want my daughters to ever see that. And she was not joking. She was not trying to pull a fast one on me to see how I reacted. She was disturbed. And she goes, they're sitting Indian style in the ferns, watching my daughters jump on the trampoline at night and watch them playing in the bay window on the 2nd floor. We see the remnants of them sitting there, and we know it's not deer because of the glowing eyes. And she goes, I want them gone. I don't want to deal with this. I'm glad you're here and you believe us, but we can't kill them. We've tried to shoot at them. Now Chad's, getting stoned out of his mind with his friends going up there, and they're like shooting at each other accidentally, trying to get to them, going up the muddy cliffs. And I looked at Beth and I was just like, this is too much for us. Like, we can't deal with this Chad guy. Like, this is getting scary. And so we pulled back, and Beth agreed that it was too significant of an issue between this Chad and Mary. Now, I ended up being friends with Chad, but Chad wanted to kind of intimidate you, especially if you're a guy on his property, talking to his wife. And he looked like a big bad MMA bouncer type. So we pulled back and I found out, 4 houses down the road, Earl Kelso, Navy veteran, just like me. I introduced myself randomly to Earl Kelso one afternoon out of desperation to get up there because I knew it was private property. And I think they said as much as like, we can't go all the way up there. We haven't because it's not our land. And it's just like, well, whose land is it? Well, I found out, I don't know how, but 4 houses down the way is Candy, Earl, and their grandson, Eric. And I pull up to, I think it was a month later, because I'm not messing with Chad and the pit bulls. I'm not messing with the pit bulls either. So I pull into this random guy's driveway and knock on the door, hoping that he would know who owned the mountain behind them. Well, it turns out he did. And he immediately looked behind at my car and saw 2 giant Bigfoot vinyl stickers on the hood of my car because I was promoting these town halls and I had a giant Bigfoot impression on the hood of my car. And he goes, "Are you into Bigfoot?" He had this real deep, affable voice. Cool guy. And I was just like, "Yeah." And he goes, well, he called his wife. I don't remember his wife's name. And I know he called Candy. He called out Candy. And so here comes this this fun, bubbly, 50-year-old gal named Candy, Earl's daughter. And he says, "Candy, go get the pictures." And so out the double wide, through this creaky screen door, out on the, mossy bench out front, we all sit. And he goes, if you're into Bigfoot, and I totally believe they're real, and so does Candy, how do they leave footprints in the snow in our property and disappear? So that was the first time I'd ever talked to someone who had a photograph of tracks that disappeared in the snow and he didn't know what to do with. And they looked like size 13 naked 5-toed human tracks coming down the hill out into the field and then disappearing. And I said, "Earl, I don't know, but if you give me permission to go up on that hill, maybe we could find out together because your neighbors have issues and I'm just dying to get up there and see one of these things." And he goes, "Yeah, I'll tell you what, why don't you take my grandson, Candy's son, Eric, with you? He's running with the wrong crowd at school." And I said, "Okay." So a couple of weeks passed by, and I'm trying to put this in order of things that happen here and leave out some of the stuff that doesn't matter. But let me just tell you, within that month period of getting permission from Earl to get back on that property, I had a couple different big events happen. First, I saw a scat that couldn't be identified in front of Earl's John Deere tractor that his dog was scared of. And we had a photograph sent to OSU because I think they have I think they're one of the only schools in the Northwest that offer a veterinary degree or something like that. I don't hold me on that. But they identified the scat photo. And let me tell you first that the scat had 2 weird impressions in the grass. And it wasn't even wet grass. They looked like human footprints. And there was the lump in the middle by the John Deere tractor. And so we sectioned up, put it in a shoebox, because you're supposed to put it like in cardboard when you collect a scat sample. So we called Kathy Strain, archaeologist, and was like, "Kathy, what do we do with this scat?" She goes, "That's weird." And so I was like, "Okay, Kathy Strain, the author, the archaeologist, says it's weird. We're taking it." And so we took the scat. None of the animals cared for it. And then we sent a photograph up to OSU. And they said, "Well, it has bone in it, and it's the wrong color to be this, that, or the other. It's not human. It looks human, but it's got bone in it. So it must be a timber wolf." But that doesn't make any sense. Well, it did kind of make sense because I was a truck driver at that time, and I'd spoken to people that had seen timber wolves up near that area. And timber wolves are tall. But then you had these footprints, right? They weren't really castable. We just took some photographs, put like a rope around them to identify them. And so that was strange. And then I would go up periodically and start gifting because I heard that was a thing. Like you can leave gifts out for these things. And maybe they'll leave something back for you in return. One time when I was up there checking on some Orville Redenbacher popcorn and a wind chime I'd left, I think it was like July, it was super hot. And I'd walked up just to the first section of this old skid road where we found this log X formation, which could have been wind, whatever. But I walked behind the X and I checked the stuff. It's like 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I can hear the pit bulls off to my left. I can hear Candy yelling at her grandson off to the right. And then the highway's right here. You can hear log trucks. Like it feels super safe. You're in the backyard of somebody's house, right? Basically. And so I'm walking back to my car, and sitting in the trail is this ripped in half vole. I don't even think it was a mole, but a vole is different than a mole. Same, very tiny, like a little mouse, but they got a weird nose, like a shrew or something. Anyway, it was freshly picked in half, and it didn't have any predation on it. It had no ants. It was hot summer, and it had just been ripped in half and on the trail. I was like, well, I don't know. That's weird. Like blood is still kind of oozing out of it. I think I took a photo and lost it on my old laptop. So as I'm bending down to take a photo, and this is getting to the part of the story where this place I nicknamed Oz because it was so crazy, right? As I'm bending over to take a photo, I hear the loudest footsteps coming from behind me at a very fast pace. And my first inclination, because my back was turned to Chad's house, is I pissed Chad off. And that Chad is coming to kill me or kick my ass, and he's out of his gourd. Maybe he's high as F. I didn't know. That was my first instinct. But these steps were like an elephant on two legs, just boom, 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 coming right at me. And I turned around immediately, and there was nothing. And the sound stopped right as I turned around, and it was close, like, I don't know, from you to the camera close, I figure. I don't remember what my next move was. I think I ran down the mountain to Earl. And I immediately came back the next day. And I hiked higher than we've ever, because there was this rumor that on top of the mountain was an abandoned helipad. And it was grown over grass, but flat. And you could, if you had to drop a helicopter there for some reason, you could. But nobody knew where it was. Earl told me it exists. And he said, that's kind of my property boundary right there at the helipad. So go all the way up there. So I went all the way up there, but I brought Eric. Now, Eric was on the spectrum. I don't know with what, but he was gifted in some ways and not others. And extremely happy, excited and happy all the time. And loved to ride his dirt bike. And was kind of an adventuresome kid. And I guess he was probably about 14, 13 maybe. So we got up first thing in the morning, and we were going to stay the night up there. And I was just like, if we can get to this helipad, you know, with the cloaking and the footprints and Chad, Mary and Candy and your dad and the disappearing, maybe we can have an experience bigger and better than ever. And so we get up to the helipad, and we find the helipad. We cross through some rhododendron bushes. Now, rhododendron bushes in the Pacific Northwest are trees. Some of them are 15, 20 feet tall, and they're spindly branches. They weave like all over. And so you kind of push yourself through those and the salal brush, and then we came out to this clearing, this old path. And there was this unmowed, flat helipad. Like it looked like a place where you could play croquet. But one thing you could do is you could definitely put a tent up there. So we put a tent up. I had my one-man REI tent, ultralight, with, it had a rain fly that I had made out of mosquito netting, kind of like we have blocking our door. That may actually be the same. I think that is the same one that I used. They agree. And so I was just like, hey, let's set up camp here, and we'll hike around. So we put our tent down, we put the candy wrappers out front, and well, let me start over. So we set our tent down kind of right at the entry point of this helipad landing.
Can you start over one more time?
Yeah. So we set our tent down at the beginning of where this helipad was, and it overlooked the entire McKenzie Valley. Like, you could see Good Pasture Island Bridge, the historic, white bridge that crossed the McKenzie. You could see the town of Thurston and the Weyerhaeuser in the distance. And if it was a clear sky like it was when we got up there at night, you could see everything. But this was like the middle of summer, no wind, and that's important. So we put up the mosquito netting on top of the tent. We tie it down to the 4 aluminum tent poles, or 2 aluminum tent poles, 4 sides. And then we have like a couple candy bars, and I'm looking over the map and we're talking and the kid's excited. We found it, blah, blah, blah. Can't wait to tell Earl about it and give him a report. So we're taking some photos. And I was just like, well, it's going to be a while till it's night and we're not going back down. Let's hike around here. So we found an old trail. Well, we go to the top of this old trail, and we're going up there. And Eric goes, oh, if you go down this road, I bet this is where the old lady Geddes lives. And she's a widow. And I bet this is probably her old road, like an old gravel road. I was like, okay. So this old widow in her 90s lived out there in a double wide 2. But no signs of anybody else at all. Everything's overgrown. And we get to the top of the trees and we're looking down over this, I call it like an amphitheater. And all it really was there was a clear cut on a slope, and then we were at the tree line, but we were looking down from the tree line at the next set of trees. So we had this huge clearing. We're sitting at the tree line and we're looking down, and we can see even better. Now we can see a lot more wilderness way out there. I would say this tree line is probably maybe 100 yards away. And I was like, well, let's get back down to the tent and we'll get ready and make an MRE or whatever. And so we get down to the helipad, and as we walk down, again, beautiful summer day, no wind, the tent's missing, and the tent is gone. The only thing that is there is the mosquito netting that has been untied off of the aluminum poles of the ultralight tent, and the candy wrappers and the map. And they're sitting there in front of where the tent was. So Eric's looking at me, he's just like, where'd it go? Where'd the tent go? And I'm looking around and he's looking around, and then we round the corner from the trail we just came in on to find this helipad, and the tent is on top of the rhododendron bushes, and it's 49 feet away. We measured it around a corner. So it was like a S shape. And so if we had the tent here, it had managed to go around an S shape back onto the trail and sit about 7 to 8 feet up. And it was upright. That's the thing about the tent, is it was placed with the floor facing the forest floor. And I think it was facing the same way. And there was no wind. And for the only thing that this could have been is that somebody had found our tent and played a joke on us. But Eric was freaking out. I don't know Eric's health condition at that point. I don't really know that kid. Here he is, like I'm in the woods with a stranger's kid, right? And I'm just like, well, we can't stay the night here tonight. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if somebody moved our tent. The candy wrappers are exactly where we left them. So we decide to go back down and call it. Well, I had told Beth what had happened and told all the Bigfooters I knew what had happened. But Beth was the only one that was willing to go up there. And I said, it's a hard hike. Like, it's like this, like the only trail that was made was the one by our boots. And it was kind of hard to find. And I don't even think we were flagging anything at that time. So I was just like, we got to get up there again. Like, my tent was moved. So we get up that way, and it's a beautiful evening. And the plan is to stay the night again, put the tent down, and research. Now, she had already seen Bigfoot. She was attached to the Olympic project. But the one thing that she said is, I can't wait for you to see the lights. Like, someday when you're doing this, you'll be able to see these plasmoids, or these, this is what they're calling them now, these plasmoids, these orbs. We decide to go up there to the same spot, put the tent back, and when we get up there, the sun is setting. It's another beautiful night. No wind. I think it's July or August. And we go immediately up to this clear-cut area. And as we're sitting at the top of the clear-cut area, looking down at the trees, I'm describing everything, how I kind of have not followed up with Chad and Mary because of the weirdness going on with Chad. But this Earl Kelso stuff, and Candy and Eric, they just like give me Bigfoot Disneyland here, and stuff is bound to happen up here if we wait long enough. And she goes, okay. So we're sitting there and we're looking, we're up on top of this tree line on this clear cut, looking down at the next row of trees. And it must have been about 11 o'clock at night. And it stays light late in the Northwest in the summer. But the moon was up. I remember that. The moon was up. And it was clear. And all of a sudden, in front of the trees, about 60 feet, 70 feet up in front of the next row of trees, was the biggest explosion of white light that I'd ever seen. And it was no sound. It looked like a pyrotechnic explosion. It looked like a firework. Okay, it looked like... It's hard to describe what it looked like because it exploded fairly quickly, but it was big. It was a huge burst of white light in front of the trees. And it certainly seemed like it was showing itself to us when it did it. Like it was something that was hard to forget. And I turned to Beth and I was just like, is that an orb? And she's like, no, that's not an orb. That's something different. I think she said something to the effect of, that looks like it's angelic. And it reminded me like of a giant star, right? Like a huge burst of white light, a supernova in the forest, a huge explosion without any sound. And when I say it was white, yeah, it was white. But it was also absence of darkness. And you could look right into it. It was like darkness, or the environment behind it was ripping apart. And if that was a white tunnel, you would have walked towards it like a near-death thing. But it had streaks, spires, they were coming out of it. And then it just shrunk in on itself and it vanished. We thought that was it. That would have been incredible. It did it 3 more times, and each time it did it, it was about the same size, and it moved from right to left, and it was always lower. And it took about 40 minutes, something like that, for 4 phases of this white explosion to come in front of the trees. No sound, no messages, no download, no UFOs, no Bigfoot, no wood knocks. nothing like people describe with orbs, right? Like volleyball sized, diffused, dirty glow stick colored plasmoids going through the forest. Anyway, she was totally unfazed by this, which was so weird. Like, imagine yourself sitting next to someone you saw like the most paranormal thing on a summer day, and there's the other person just kind of laughing and not not getting excited. It was probably one of the craziest. Well, I mean, come on, like that was the first thing I'd seen that was supernatural happen. Like, I didn't see the footsteps, I didn't know it killed the vole. All those things were kind of like firsts. And so when I saw that light, that was my Roy Neary moment, because I didn't know what the hell I just witnessed. I knew that it meant something. And, I followed up on that by going back to that encounter later. Other people would witness little sparks of white light in the shrubbery. One was like in a monsoon rain when we were up there in and around the same area by the helipad. And there were these white, almost looked like a Zippo lighter without any fuel, sparking in the rainstorm at midnight. It made no sense. And there's no lightning bugs in Oregon that I know of, especially up the McKenzie-Willamette Valley area. But I think that was the last time that I ever saw lights up there, was after those little sparks. But that initial one was kind of, I mean, I privately, Allie, I go back to that moment every day, and I have a profound private moment, thinking of that light, because I knew it was something that was super special, and I didn't know what it meant, and why 4 times, why there wasn't a UFO or a Bigfoot connected to it, what it was. But that's probably what drug me in to go the 19 years past that point. But the place was so crazy. So I nicknamed it Oz, and I was like, well, if I could ever find a place like that again, well, we're going to skip through a lot of stuff here and just say I found another place like that was crazy. And this was the Almoon Lab. And so Daryl Adams and I, Daryl and Cindy Adams, I think this is like over a 10-year span between Earl's place and Daryl Adams' place. McKenzie River, Cottage Grove. What is it, about an hour and a half or an hour drive between the two, Highway 126 to I-5 corridor, out toward Daryl's place. And Daryl basically said the same thing that Earl was telling me and that Candy were telling me, is that they're in my backyard. And will you come out here and let's look into this thing? So we found a lot of evidence over a period of like 3 years before Daryl eventually moved. And it's where I had a visual encounter of 95% what I would say is a Sasquatch. Finally, what did it take? About 18 years to have one? Okay. But I had not been gifted anything at that point. And that's one thing that the Native Americans were saying, is that they used to trade with them. Salmon for bear, for firewood. I was like, gosh, if I could ever have a moment like that where they would trust me so much and I wouldn't try to trick them, and I would just kind of journal the activity and I could live there. But really, the first thing that ever happened to me as far as gifting was concerned was this walking stick. It has a blunt tip on one side and a honed tip on the other. Almost looks like a fire poker of some kind, right? Or this was placed by my front door on my 16-foot Dutchman, right by the door, on this, somewhat remote property where UFOs, poltergeist, and Bigfoot was at. And I've never really shown it, but this is the stick, the first gift. I assume that's what it is. The weird thing about it is that it was placed by the door so I could see it upright, just like this. I had got off work. I was working still as a truck driver at that time. And I got out of my car to hop into the trailer to clean up and then check on Daryl, see what weirdness happened. And there was a lot of weirdness. And there this was, sitting upright, tipped down. And it was sitting next to an existing stick that I already had. And I picked it up like a week or two earlier in Portland, Oregon, way out by Estacada. And it was on the walking trail. We were Bigfooting with a friend of mine at the time, Kirk Sigurdsson, author of a couple of Bigfoot books. And I think he was a contributor to Letters to the Big Man. And he lived in Portland, and we're hiking. Maybe we stayed the night. And we had found a honed tip, blunt, what looked like vampire dagger. I think it even said vampire on the side of it, carved into it like a vampire stake. And it was sitting on the trail. I'm like, well, that's super weird. Like, I'm taking that. Well, it had like, just you would kill a vampire. The same thing, but it was short. And I had placed it just on the ground next to the trailer. Well, this thing sat right next to it, upright. And it matched it. I mean, in design. And I thought, well, Daryl surely found a stick. And he's like, oh, you like weird vampire looking sticks, right? Or whatever. Well, Daryl didn't leave it. And I wasn't quite sure if he was lying or what. But I was just like, well, maybe this is like part of the phenomena. Like this is a gift or a trade. And so the gifts started coming in 24/7 on Daryl's property. Like there is all sorts of stuff. Like you watch Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, and Paranormal Bigfoot, the Almoon Lab book. We'll talk about all those gifts. Like I put out a 2x4 from the beginning gift to the last gift, and there was well over 30 things that were left in weird places on the property, and they progressively got bigger and bigger. But the first gift was that. The second gift was set by these plaster knee impressions that we had in the garage. And it was this little blue velociraptor that was sitting in a locked garage above these plaster knee impressions that were found above Daryl's house, plus or minus 1,400 pounds, anomalous hair plucked out, entire scene recorded and documented. Hair came back as anomalous, nothing matched in the data set for the microscopic studies done by the Hominid Enigma Project, Cindy Dawson up in Canada. But this little guy was sitting upright, right above the knees in the locked garage. And I, of course, thought Daryl or maybe one of his grandkids had got in there and he wanted to show him the knee impressions while I was at work. But Daryl says, well, I haven't had my grandkids over and they haven't been inside that locked garage. And I thought, well, what the heck? Why would they leave a toy like that, right? You can go see these knee impressions now for a short time at the Area 58 Museum in Oak Ridge, Oregon. You can see where the toothbrush was and where the little velociraptor was, balancing over the top of it upright. We're actually going up to, when we go down to Oregon, we're going to be bringing the Almoon knee impressions back home. We're going to bring them back here to the Olympic Peninsula, and we're actually going to have them as a surprise for anybody that wants to see them and look at them. And I'd love more eyes on them. We've had a orthopedic surgeon, a sonographer, and a Boeing engineer, Scott Taylor, all come to the conclusion, along with Cindy Dawson, that these are anomalous human-like knees of plus or minus 1,400 pounds. Whatever. Crazy, right? Or as Barb Shoop says, cool, huh? And so we're bringing those back home. Cool, huh? We're going to have those August 22nd at our second town hall in Port Angeles, Washington, at the Black Diamond Community Hall. Not only will we have these knee impressions there from 4 to 9, $10 door fee cash. Come on. Actually, we're also going to announce that bring a dish. Like, I think this should be like a potluck style. So when you come in, you want to have something to eat, you're going to be there a while, bring a dish with you and a beverage. And we'll set it up potluck style for everybody. And we can make it more of like a communal Grange environment. But it's your chance to see the knee impressions, Harvest Moon, and the boys from Olympic Sasquatches. So we hope you see there. The Facebook page will be up and ready by the time this comes up. So if you just go to Facebook and type in Olympic Strange Days, Strange Town Hall, you'll see us come up under Olympic Strange Days on Facebook. It'll also be attached to our website at olympicstrangedays.com. The last thing I want to say is that I've waited all my life to find something better than all these mysteries. And it just so happened that one day it showed up in the little town of Oak Ridge, kind of our meeting spot, Allie. And I'm just so grateful and humbled and undeserving of you guys see her on camera. You can see how well we get along, and that's very hard to fake, so we don't have to fake it. This is what we love doing, and I'm so grateful that I'm also engaged, and I have no ring yet. I just have a big stained hand. So we hope we see you August 22nd. That's it for me, Allie. Back to carping.